Okay, welcome back. So now we're going to talk about wave 5. Okay. Wave 5 is the modern era. Okay. So if we were to characterize the fourth wave was more or less saying, okay, we recognize that government should be stepping in and observing businesses more closely for the interest of society. Okay. But we will also reduce the regulations to an extent through the movement of deregulation. Okay, Wave 5 also continued the movement of deregulation, thought that regulations had gone too much and we should try to trim those back a little bit more. However, in my recent memory, and for some of you as well, 9/11 actually reversed the trend of deregulation. And so you started having a huge growth in government agencies, many of them originally dedicated to protecting American security. In fact, Wave 5 has given us more regulation proportionally than any other time in American history besides FDR. And of course, 9/11, as some of you may remember, kind of was kind of the first steps of a recession that I think is still going on. The Federal Reserve Board, the Department of Treasury, also started intervening more massively in the market to prevent an economic collapse following the 9/11 attacks. One of them, of course, was TARP. And TARP, I should probably put that down. Troubled Asset Relief Program. And this basically said that federal regulators were given power, or given funds specifically, so that they could buy ownership in large banks and corporations. And because of them bailing out these corporations, the government was also able to impose conditions on these organizations. Of course, we also have the Office of Financial Stability in the Treasury Department. But again, so government now begins buying parts of business in order to impose regulations on them. This sounds like a radical idea. However, I would like to point out, at least from a European perspective, this is quite common. Okay, so let me go ahead. I've talked about so much history kind of going on here. Let me just go ahead and summarize these kind of succinctly. Okay, if you remember nothing else, Wave 1. Okay. The government passed regulations exclusively to promote business interests. And I forgot to mention, this was up until about the 1870s, post-bellum period, after Civil War period. Okay. Wave 2, okay, this lasted up until about World War I. You start having some interest in promoting kind of neoclassical economic efficiency, in particular with the breaking up of large monopolies like the Rockefellers, Standard Oil, Vanderbilt, etc. Okay. Wave 3, this was FDR's time. So this was the New Deal. The government should and has an obligation to intervene in the market to correct flaws, particularly in the face of a major recession. Wave 4, this was more or less the 60s and 70s. Okay? Again, society started doubting that government was actually looking after their interests, and so even more regulation occurred. But this was also coupled with, more regulatory agencies were born, but this was coupled with deregulation, or an effort to roll back the scale of regulations to simplify business transactions. Wave 5, this is the contemporary era. The first part of it before 9/11 was looking at more and more deregulation. Okay, that was the 90s when business was thriving. But then there was 9/11. The government began intervening, A, to promote American security, and B, to prevent a widespread financial panic. So let me get a red pen here. We've also got, when it comes to regulation, we have what we call war blips. Okay, so one of the things that you have to remember, it's kind of this concept of total war. And total war basically means the entire country mobilizes to support a war effort. Now, during the Civil War, the total war didn't occur nearly as much in the North. Although the North did create a national banking system to help finance the war, you did see aspects of total war in the South with businesses supporting the Confederate armies. And of course, World War I is really the concept of total war. This is when the government actively intervened, reappropriated industrial capacity, specifically to promote our ability to fight a war. Okay, so business, government, and society, we all kind of jump on the same team, and we're all in it together. You had the same thing during World War II and the Korean War. And you have to remember, when there is wartime control of industry in particular, there's a whole lot of regulations that have to go with that. Okay? So every time they call this a war blip, so it kind of blips up the number of regulations that exist during wartime. Now, the Vietnam War and the two Gulf Wars, and of course our operation during freedom of Operation Iraqi Freedom, these were not exactly total wars, so you didn't have the same accompanying spike in regulations. So what we're going to do is stop here, and then we're going to shift gears and talk about how regulations are actually made.